Hello, and welcome to the first of what I hope is many episodes of A Fistful of Dice. My name is Matt, and I figured a good first episode would be just sort of me talking about how I got started in playing tabletop RPGs and experiences with Dungeons & Dragons and how I grew up with these games. Even though I didn't actually start playing D&D until about 7th grade, I realized that I got started with gaming and with board games and with role-playing much earlier on. In 1993, there was a board game called Dragon Strike, which I got for Christmas from my grandma. And came to find years and years later that it was actually a board game developed by TSR, and it was actually based on the Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game. I never actually learned how to play this game. You know, I was like 6 at the time. But I remember it had really cool little miniatures, and it actually came with a VHS tape with certain clips in it that you would play when you reach certain points of the game. So the VHS tape was essentially your dungeon master in this game, and I just remember thinking that the miniatures were really cool. I distinctly remember that there was a scorpion centaur guy, so he was like half scorpion, half man. He looked sort of like a stinger, I guess, from Dungeons & Dragons. And yeah, I remember thinking that it was really cool, but I never really figured out how to play. I know my dad probably tried to get me to figure out how to play it, but I never took the time to learn the rules of the game. My first role-playing game experience was actually in 5th grade when my dad and I played some sessions of the original West End games Star Wars role-playing game. Now this is actually the 2nd edition, so this is not the edition we played. I believe we played 1st edition, but it was the West End games version of the Star Wars RPG. And I don't remember a ton about it, but I do remember that I was playing basically a Han Solo type character, and I was a smuggler getting caught up with the rebellion, and I remember that I was fighting a Scout Walker, an ATST, and I kept trying to shoot my blaster into the viewport, and my dad, who was running the game, kept saying it's going to be a really tough shot. And you know, I don't understand the rules. I'm just like, whatever. Han Solo could do it, so I can do it. You know, never mind that I'm a level 1 character. From there, it was a couple years until I played another role-playing game. But it was around this time that I started discovering fantasy literature, or but the fantasy genre of books. And I, without really realizing it, was getting into Dungeons & Dragons because I was reading things like the Icewind Dale trilogy, which is set in Ed Greenwind's Forgotten Realms, and Dragonlance Chronicles, which is obviously set in the Dragonlance setting from Dungeons & Dragons. So without even really being cognitive of it, I was sort of getting into Dungeons & Dragons. From there, I started getting into computer RPGs like Baldur's Gate, which I didn't know at the time, also set in the Forgotten Realms and using the advanced 2nd edition rules of Dungeons & Dragons, and again, developed by TSR. So I'm sort of being unwittingly drawn into this world that I would later come to love. Now, here's where I finally make the jump into Dungeons & Dragons. This was 7th grade, and 3rd edition had just come out. My dad started talking about Dungeons & Dragons. He sort of asked me, would you be interested in playing some Dungeons & Dragons? And I was like, I guess, isn't that like is that a game for nerds? You know, I sort of had this idea in my head, even though I was playing games like Baldur's Gate, reading, you know, Dragonlance books and the Icewind Dale books and the earlier Drizzt books, and just, you know, really into Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. You know, I was still like, isn't that like a special club? You know, don't you have to be a certain level of nerd to get into this? My dad sort of set me straight, and he goes, I'll be back. I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna buy the new edition of Dungeons & Dragons that came out. So he went out to our local Wizards of the Coast. This was back when we actually had a Wizards of the Coast store, where I used to buy my Pokemon cards and he picked up a starter set for 3rd edition, which came with an adventure book and a rule book, which I still have. This was my first edition of D&D. We played a little adventure where we went to investigate a crypt, and I played a rogue, and I died. So that was my first session of Dungeons & Dragons, but you know what? Fun. And even though I was a little bit discouraged because my character had died, I still enjoyed myself. And so we kept playing. I created my first character. The first character that I played was pre-made. He was a half-drow paladin, and his name was Lamadar or Lamindar or Laminsar, something Lam. He's kind of inspired by Dritz. I was really into Dritz at that time. I'll never forget this. I rolled a crit with my greatsword and like hacked off this guy's head. And my dad sort of described, you know, what was happening. And I just thought it was so cool. I just thought it was so neat that I did this, that my character did this. You know, a level 1 paladin, you know. I rolled a crit with my greatsword. From that point on, I sort of played games on and off. I, you know, got 3.5. You know, 3.5 came out. We got 3.5, and we played that. You know, as a family. My dad somehow talked my mom into playing Dungeons & Dragons for like a couple years, and you know, she hasn't played for a long time, but both my sister and my mom played Dungeons & Dragons with my dad and I, which was just awesome. It was really cool, and it was kind of a fun family time. Now from here, we sort of go into another sort of dead area where I didn't play for a long time, but I get super heavily into Neverwinter Nights, which is a game developed by Wizards of the Coast and BioWare, which uses the D&D 3.5 rules. I played Neverwinter Nights all the way through the campaign with my dad. I bought the expansions, played the expansions, and then I discovered the online servers. And I played on the online servers for, well, until now. I still sometimes hop on the online servers, so that was fun as well. But then from there I started branching out, discovering new systems. I played Savage Worlds for a long time, both with my family and also with my gaming group in college. In college, I helped found a gaming group. We were fairly small, but we ran for like 3 years, and we played things like Savage Worlds, the Star Wars Saga Edition role-playing game. We did play D&D, we played Warhammer Fantasy RPG, we played Legend of the Five Rings, Game of Thrones, man, what else did we play? Just a ton of stuff. While I was in college, 4th edition came out. I don't have any of the 4th edition books, I just have the Keep of the Shadowfell little mini session here. And I ended up not buying any of the 4th edition books because I didn't like it that much. And I'm not going to get into it in this video because that's not the point, but I'll just say that I have nothing against 4th edition or the people who play it. It's just not my system of D&D, so we'll move on from there. I'm sure there'll be another video where I talk about 4th edition, but anyway, tried 4th edition, played it for a little bit. It wasn't my bag. Now we hit a dry spell. My senior year of college, I didn't really play anything. Year or so after, I didn't play anything. And a few of my high school friends wanted to get a gaming group together. And I was gonna DM some 3.5, but I didn't really feel like it. And I started hearing about this system, Pathfinder. And at this time, I was working at a gaming store, slinging Pokemon cards, Yu-Gi-Oh cards, Magic cards mostly, but we also carried a lot of Dungeons & Dragons and other RPGs. Everyone was talking about Pathfinder, saying that it was amazing, that it was the spiritual successor to 3rd and 3.5, that it was more D&D than 4th edition. So I started paying attention to it, and at the gaming store that I worked at, we got this in, the Pathfinder role-playing game core rulebook. And, you know, started looking through it, started reading through it, really liking what I saw, so I decided I was going to run Pathfinder. and I have never looked back. That was about 3 years ago, and I've been running Pathfinder ever since. But so that is my history with gaming. I go back a long way with Dungeons & Dragons and TSR and Wizards of the Coast in general, even if I didn't realize it at the time. So I've always really loved gaming, and even though I've sort of gotten in and out of it, I really feel like it's something that I'm going to be doing for the rest of my life. It's a passion of mine. I love creating adventures, and likewise I also love playing in adventures. So thank you for watching Fistful of Dice. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I will see you guys next video. Happy gaming all.